Call the committee back to order at 2 p.m. And this afternoon, we're continuing our questioning on the Auditor General's report on Customs Department. And we have Mr. Howell.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this honorable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir. You want to answer questions too, or just
me.
did okay?
Yes, sir.
You don't trust you to go through. Yeah, exposure by swearing in. Good afternoon, Mr. Howell and Mr. Ebanks, I think it is, right? Got a north side haircut. Thanks for coming, sir. I think you've been here before, so you know the rules. When the first question that you answer, just state your full name and position for purposes of the Hansard record. So we'll open the floor up to questions. Mr. Saunders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first, I'd like to welcome the Chief Officer and the Deputy Chief Officer to this hearing. I'd like to start out with a simple question. Listening to Mr. Jefferson this morning explaining the governance model in the previous finance ministry, where there was one senior assistant secretary that was given, I guess, responsibility in terms of the customs. I'm just wondering from a transitional standpoint from one ministry to the next ministry, and recognizing that the scope of customs have changed to know customs and border control that also includes some aspect of immigration. What governance structure have you guys put in place to basically manage this new, very large department, but also very dynamic department?
Thank you. Wesley Howell, Chief Officer for the Ministry of Employment and Border Control. Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's a very excellent question. So I can first start by saying that some of the roles that were being performed under the Ministry of Finance when Customs as a department fell under finance still fall under finance in relation to concessions and those sorts of things. So those bits that have to go through the Minister of Finance and Cabinet, those bits remain with finance. In relation to CBC as an entity, so we recognize that in addition to the staffing, we would also take on the additional oversight of revenue for the revenue that CBC collects on behalf of government, and together with the revenue collected by the work agency, that's a significant part of the government overall revenue. So we did a couple of things. We moved a senior policy officer who was a qualified attorney into the ministry to provide legislative support, work more closely with the AG's office in relation to advice and other things related to the legal side of things. We reached out to internal audit and developed an MOU with them. So we have assigned to our ministry a full-time auditor that we pay the internal audit unit for, and they work to review our internal processes and good governance and all those issues, and then flag up matters for us to address sort of proactively. So we saw that as a proactive move towards good governance and operation around that particular side. In relation to policy and IT, again, we've bolstered the IT support within CBC by adding an additional resource within CBC for IT. support and expertise. And we've also added on a second project manager within the ministry, so we will have 2 full-time project managers within the ministry to help provide that oversight. I can say, as the CBC and immigration was a merger, we have a number of deputy directors within CBC that we're working very closely with to build additional capacity within CBC to take on some more of the strategic and policy type issues from within CBC outwards as well. Sorry for the long answer.
No. That's fine, and thanks very much for that comprehensive answer, because ultimately one of the things that we want from these public account committee hearings is not for the public to believe that it's just all bad and all got you, but also as a tool to provide information to the public to let them understand how best or how better the government and the representatives are working. One of the things, and we don't want to kind of, I guess, get back into the previous issues, because one, we do recognize that the CBC itself is roughly around 8 months old, thereabouts. And we do also recognize that there were some legacy issues and lessons learned in terms of some of the challenges, like with the TRIP system, which both the previous witnesses had kind of touched on before. One of the things I'm more interested in learning or knowing is not where we are or where we're coming from, but rather where we're going. And in terms of the whole modernized process of the CBC as a whole, where do you as your ministry see this evolving to eventually, as soon as the transition, the growing pains and everything? In a nutshell, what would success look like to you?
Thank you for the question, sir. Mr. Chairman, through you. CBC as it stands now is primed for continued transformation. My view on this is, once the ground starts shaking, that's the time to continue to make your transformations before it settles back into a new normal. Then you need a whole lot of impetus to get off the ground and go again. So with the alignment of the policy from the government initiating and giving us a timeline to implement CBC, to the approach that we took, sorry, I think I'm too close to the mic, the approach that we took during the transformation, and if I may touch on that really briefly. So we took the approach that CBC and Immigration Border Control were 2 like organizations, that they're uniform divisions with substantial administrative and financial oversight as well. So we initiated a merger steering committee, which was co-chaired by the then Collector of Customs and acting Chief Immigration Officer. We broke off into subcommittees that were jointly made up of customs and immigration officers. So we had a top-down and bottom-up approach to the transformation that actually allowed us to get almost full and complete buy-in from the individuals, the officers within both organizations. They selected their uniform, they voted on their logo, they even voted on the name of the organization, to which Cabinet was kind enough to allow that to be reflected in the final product. So the ownership of CBC on day one from officers across the board was a really high sort of pride that they were part and parcel of a ground up and a top down approach to building that. So that said, as we go forward now, we're looking at a high level strategic plan, multi-year plan, in which we're utilizing some of the expertise within POCs for that. We're also then already started training individuals at the lowest rank within the organization on business process analysis, re-engineering. There's some IT work that has been on the way from before Customs joined into CBC. That's continuing. We're adding to that now the project management, the business analysis, the requirements building, those sorts of things to build it out. But what we have in front of us is an opportunity, and we've started on the road of a top-down, so ministry support into the senior management of CBC and ground up in that the rank and file officers, who are the ones that really know what the answers are in any way, are now getting the tools to properly document what it takes to solve some of the issues that they have on the ground and take advantage of some of the automation that we're doing to redesign our processes prior to automation or post-automation to be a more efficient, more effective, intelligence-led organization. Again, another long answer, sorry.
No, listen, we don't mind the long answers, because that's what we want. As long as it makes sense, it's fine. One of the things that members of the committee has raised thus far, has been the issue in terms of budgeting, in terms of financing for the budget. Now, I recognize that this will be the first budget for the CBC under the new under the new setup. And one of the things that we wanted to understand from a ministry standpoint, and ultimately as being the chief officer who has overall governance responsibility for that entity, what process or what steps are you guys taking to ensure that we don't have a situation like we did last year where the budget was 22% above? No, nothing is wrong with doing better than budgeted. We expect that, and no one expects it to be perfect. But what we would expect is at least some level of analysis or further analysis going into that for your ministry to take ownership of the numbers that we can be comfortable to see is not going to be 22% out again or something like that.
So I thank you again for the question. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I, as Chief Officer, it is my signature and that of the minister that goes on the budget document. So this is something that I take very serious, and I have since my tenure as Chief Officer. So I can say that one of the directives that we did really early on was ensure that the budget preparation was done in close consultation with ESO. So we're looking at ESO to provide the technical expertise as to the macroeconomic indicators and what the growth projections are and specific industries and how that would have an effect on the revenue that's collected through the CBC agency. The other thing that we've done sort of over the years as a ministry is document what assumptions we then add to that in addition to what we may get from ESO. In general, though, in prudent budgeting, I want to be really aggressive on the expenditure side, so I don't want to underestimate what it's going to cost to do something, and I don't want to overestimate what the revenues are, because getting that wrong can be detrimental across the entire government, particularly because of the significant revenue impact that one ministry has in relation to the government budget. But that said, our goal this time around is to be as accurate as we can with the budget preparations, and where we are varying from what would be a straight line projection or otherwise, we would document what those assumptions are. And the assumptions could be, there are no further reductions in duty concessions for a particular product or those sorts of things, which has a significant flow on or impact on overall revenue projections. We are a service-based industry as well, so if there's a contraction worldwide in the service industry, that will have an impact on our economy as well. So we're looking at all those factors, but again, we are taking the time to document what those are. So in relation to the audit, having reviewed the document, one of the things that was highlighted was not so much that there wasn't consultation on the budget preparation, but it wasn't documenting what process it was. So we've immediately addressed those and started to document what those assumptions are.
Thanks again for that answer. One of the things, naturally, as you're transitioning to the entity that you have now, is resources. And one of the things that we're curious to know now, especially with budget looking to be around next month, and bearing in mind that this is singularly the largest department for revenue within the government, naturally leakage or something would be something that'd be concerned to members and the public as a whole. In terms of resources that you would need for that entity to function, this is where you are now. And I understand from listening to the director in terms of where they're looking to move in terms of more, not a gatekeeper approach, but more intelligence type gathering approach. What are you guys looking at in terms of resources now, in terms of the next step, in terms of talent skills that you would need, in terms of going to the next level or taking it to the next level?
So we've been fairly aggressive in our training budget. CBC is predominantly Caymanian staffed. We have some work to do with building capacity in the middle management area, retraining and retooling individuals to work differently and to think differently about how they work. So significant resources we expect to be in the 2020-2021 budget to help again with that transition as we go forward. There's some new positions as well, but I want to temper that with the fact that we are going very heavy on the automation side for the folks who are doing goods clearances that would normally go to the CBC headquarters. That's being done online now. Persons are submitting stuff electronically, getting their payments done electronically, and getting a response once that is done, the security checks are done based on risk profiling and such. We are receiving, for example, information both on the checkpoint 1, which is the traditional immigration bit, and checkpoint 2, which is the traditional customs bit. That collaboration is now working where immigration officers are sensing something that's not quite right about someone, and then they then highlight checkpoint 2 and they deal with issues there. So the AML, anti-money laundering role for CBC is another one where we're building capacity in relation to risk assessment and evidence-based approach to not only assessing the risk, but demonstrating that we are actively working to reduce the level of money laundering that may be happening in our jurisdiction or through our gates. Sort of the approach that led to the Venezuelan plane being seized a couple months back with the gold shipments and those sorts of things. That's an example of connecting the dots in relation to things just not seemingly being legitimate, and then delving into deploying the assets necessary to investigate those down. So I say a lot to say that we are going about it from a training retooling perspective. We do have some new positions that we're asking for, but the primary goal is to equip our officers with the training and tools necessary to get on with their jobs at this new level of high level functioning.
Thanks very much again, Mr. Howell. You had mentioned earlier concern the whole automation issue, but I think up to yesterday, there were some issues where that customs clearing thing that people use, the online process has been extremely slow. Now, I know naturally be some growing pains or something with it, but when would you expect that those teething issues will be sorted and that the platform is working correctly?
So I can say that overwhelmingly the support has been very positive for CBC, unlike the implementation of the TRIPS program. And if you indulge me a little bit to go backwards, one of the things that we didn't get quite right when we did TRIPS was, at that time, the government IT department, of which I was a part, was competing with a private company for the business of developing a system for customs. At the time, customs had a government-developed system called CTSS, Customs Technology Support System. So the leadership of customs at the time didn't have the benefit of any technical advice from the government IT agency, because we were actively competing against the private sector in relation to this development. So the negotiations, the implications of what was bought and not being properly fit for purpose, didn't get to have the technical expertise applied to it. So those are lessons learned that have been applied now. E-government now plays a role in sort of that cross-government approach to technology, standardization, contract negotiations, those sorts of things, interoperability. So the development that has taken place thus far has had heavy consultation with the primary importers. These are the customs brokers, the large importers such as the supermarkets and wholesalers. Those are the person that traditionally use the bond approach, so they pay government a sum of money and then draw down on that as they clear their goods. They're overwhelmingly in support of what we're doing and hands down appreciate that the teething problems, particularly for small importers who are importing for the first time and have to go through the accreditation process and those sorts of things, that can be a bit tedious. But for the very large percentage of our customers, it's actually a positive move in the right direction.
Sorry, you open a door which I can't help but go down. Let me get this straight. The Computer Services Department was competing, a government department was competing with an external provider on something. And let me get this straight. And the previous system that we had was developed by the government Computer Services Department?
Yes, so you're correct. So again, those were the days of interagency billing and such. So the service entities within government were being positioned sort of service delivery, not so much as assets in relation to good governance and oversight of technology projects. So we were going back several years now, but that was the playing field at the time. So.
Just had one question with the, is it possible for an individual to import anything through customs anymore? Without having to go through this whole certification process if you're just importing one time, one item? Or do you have to go get a broker?
I don't know the details, sir. I can share the experience from my 104-year-old father. So, and if you don't mind me indulging into that, I can.
No,
so
it's important.
he imports about once a year. He buys materials for his shoe shop, and last year he had some delays in that he didn't have a current driver's license, which is the ID of choice for registration. So the registration process took him a couple of weeks, but he finally got his goods cleared for his business. This year, his shipment that came in had absolutely no issues, and within days of it arriving, he was able to collect it from the freight forwarder that he used. So again, from my own experience through my father, his first initial registration was a bit painful, but after that, it was
Yeah.
good.
So what you're saying is that it's not possible. Before, you could go up to customs if you had a shipment come in for yourself, fill out the form, pay your duty, and walk away. It appears that everybody, whether it's a one-off importation or whether you're in business or not in business, you now have to go through this accreditation process to get signed up for this electronic processing.
I'm not sure, sir.
Because that's the general feeling I get from the public. And I think if that's the situation, I think I can understand it for business people or even private people who are importing, not like that once a year, but that's process. But if you just have a shipment come in and you want to clear it, you should be able to go and clear it without having to either get a broker to do it or go through this elaborate process of getting accredited or certified or whatever you call it.
I will undertake to get a confirmation on whether or not there's still a manual process in place, and I can provide that to you in writing, sir.
I agree.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I was right there with your father, remember? I was with you. And, Mr. Chairman, you are right, sir, in the question that you asked. And I've asked this question before. You do realize that there are Caymanians that do have driver's license. You also do realize there are Caymanians that don't even have a passport. And the question I've asked before, and no one has been able to give me, what happens when one of these individuals walk in and want to clear their stuff? This is what must be made clear to the public. Mr. Chairman, through you, it was so frustrating. It forces you almost to go to a broker. Of course, that's extra money again.
I maintain that was the original plan.
Correct. And we have to keep in mind when these things are in place that there are poor people that are not computer literate. They're not idiots. But what was so complicated about going to the counter and clearing your own stuff? And the time frame takes forever. So I do hope that is still being looked into and tried to be improved, because I was right there, you were right there, so we knew what we went through that day. Luckily, you kept calm. I didn't say anything, but I wasn't calm. But it's really frustrating, and a lot of constituents are complaining and have complained. Yes. So
When it's available,
you all are
being
looking
shafted.
into trying to make this better.
Mr. Chairman, I again undertake to look into that, and I'll respond in writing to yourself and the committee.
Just one, for my clarification, the electronic system that you're replacing, what's it called, TRIPS with, is another off-the-shelf program, or is that being developed by computer services locally?
It's a bespoke custom system developed, not custom in relation to customs duty, but it was developed specifically around the business processes for customs in conjunction with computer services and dedicated contractors that were sourced within the skill set and supervised by CSD. So it is a amalgamation of in-house government and some external expertise as well.
Sorry, just so I'm trying to understand that, in terms of developing such a system, was it envisioned that that system would have been standalone or would have been integrated into a bigger government system?
So the plans that I've seen from Customs when we looked at it pre-merger was for the system to eventually take on a lot of the administrative responsibilities for Customs. Now, post-merger with Border Control, we have another system that is in use by Border Control that's also tied to work permits and residence and some other things. So we are now looking at how best to couple those systems together as we go forward, and whether or not they move all to the Customs platform. We have some integration that we build in going forward, or otherwise.
One of the things, sorry, thank you very much for the answer. One of the things I guess I'm trying to determine, and looking at the overall central government, and this may go a little bit just outside of Customs itself or CBC, is while I understand that the government system is robust in the sense of its own firewall, security and everything, for every time we add on another system or integrate another system that speaks to the government core system, then we're basically opening ourselves up to cyber attacks or being hacked or something like that. And one of the things I'm curious about, which kind of really when it got me in the sense of where the government computer services department is also tasked with the government security ultimately from an IT standpoint, is competing against someone else for service. I always believe that something can be done in-house, that should be done in-house, so that way the expertise stays in-house, the maintenance stays in-house, and more importantly, the security stays in-house. So from an overall standpoint, what I'm trying to understand here, or the question is, where are we ultimately as a government going? Because that model cannot continue where we allow someone to have a bolt-on here or a little piece here. Because every time we open that door to third-party providers, we're in a sense giving them a back door possibly into central government. And that is something now that's kind of really giving me a little bit of a pause.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And again, sort of uniquely positioned because of my background with technology, I'm actually pleased to say that the move that was made to separate e-government and, in particular, the government IT security from the implementers from CSD was a good move. In the e-government committee, the e-government department has the IT security folks in their portfolio. They're not completely resourced as they should, so they're relying on some other sharing arrangements, but they are building out that responsibility. And as a ministry, we have undertook to closely couple ourselves with them in relation to system design and system requirements, particularly around services that are exposed to the internet. And even on the internal side, exposed to folks within government to ensure that the security is as solid as it can be, and to minimize our exposure by piggybacking on their sort of bolt-on approach to the front-end aspect. Work is also being done in relation to cross-connecting the system so that individuals and organizations could then be better tracked. One of the discussion points in the audit report was due to concessions, and I don't want to open back up that can of worms, but I can say by tying the systems together where entities are referred to in a common understanding from system to system would help to be able to track what individual entities are doing in relation to different departments, may it be trade and business or pensions or health insurance or some of these other things. So that's where e-government is headed. We're working very closely with them, and we're working very closely with the government's head of IT security as well. Explain
to me why there's a difference. If I come into the airport as a passenger in the plane, and I declare a computer. I fill out a little form, write in payment due, and I'm done. If I ship that same computer in and I got to clear it, I have to go through this whole process of getting certified and qualified. Why can't we treat individuals like that the same way we treat them at the airport?
Again, so that's a legacy thing that I'm sure that we're looking to address that, but I will detail that as well when I respond.
I think that would increase the number of smiles you get in a little machine, because it is very frustrating. Are you part of the? Have you been involved in developing the policy and concessions, and are you comfortable that you can monitor and implement how concessions are imported and with the policy as it has been drafted?
No, sir, I haven't been involved with the policy thus far, but I do welcome such a policy. As a ministry, we have several agencies for which would either be sort of a beneficiary to having a better centrally supervised and coordinated approach to concession monitoring, and particularly the more sort of difficult bit on sort of what the outcomes are from the concessions in the longer term. So I understand that there's a role to be played by the work agency in relation to the employment aspects, also impacts then, sort of information that we get from pensions and labor in relation to the good treatment of Cayman labor and that sort of thing. So we are looking forward to having some input on the policy and benefiting from an overall coordinated approach.
If a member of society wanted to report what they believe is abuse of concession, they have obviously evidence that a company and entity has concessions for this particular job, but they are aware that material is imported for that job, but it is used on other jobs. Who do they contact? You, the police, or the anti-corruption, or who?
I would recommend that they contact our tip line. It's a confidential tip line. There's also, sort of the government whistleblower hotline that is directed through an entity in the U.S., so there's nobody's going to recognize.
Are you confident that nobody in this government would want to hang over whistleblowers? I mean, we all watch TV, right? I don't think you can get anything from any whistleblowers for years to come.
We've added some layers to divorce the whistleblower from internal processes, so we don't get any voice recordings or any of those sorts of things. We get information that is passed on to us. The person making the tip gets a code that they can use for rewards and other things down the road, but there is no direct linkage to us. But I can say, individuals will like they do with your windshield, sir, will pull me aside in the supermarket and other places and whisper in my ear as well. So I encourage folks to tell whoever they're comfortable with telling, but we have mechanisms set up that those sorts of abuses can be reported.
The director, Mr. Clifford, had mentioned in terms of the development of the strategic plan. And I know that's one of the things that is still outstanding. I understand that some progress is on it, but I also do, to some extent, understand that as it's still a young agency and you're going through the teething problem, that the operational issues will naturally take precedence over, I guess, the more nice-to-have stuff. That's one of the things I'll just ask, not from a question standpoint, but just one of the things that we expect that strategic business plan, the strategic plan to be developed very, very quickly. We expect that to be something within your ministry. But just overall, I just want to say thank you from me and on behalf of the people that I represent for the fine work that your ministry have done, and also what it is that the departments under your ministry have done. I know there are challenges, and we have work, which you're also responsible for, which we have other issues for, but from a CBC standpoint, because I know someone was kind of texting me to say, ask him about work, but I had to kind of remind them that this was a CBC and work is a separate entity. But for where we are with CBC, we think it's a step in the right direction. And ultimately, whatever it is that we can do, because it plays a very important role, but not just in the collection of revenues, but also in protecting our borders and keeping a lot of different stuff out. Looking at the Auditor General report, I didn't realize it was 22 different pieces of legislation that goes into the overall management of that department. When you start looking at it from the agricultural to come right down, all of the different legislation that affects it. So it is a very dynamic department, and the most that we can do is encourage you guys. And I will leave you the last question, which I don't think it would probably be relevant, because seeing that the Premier is responsible for this ministry, if he can't get what he wants, then no one else will. But is there anything in your opinion that you believe that ultimately as legislators and with budget coming up that you would like for us to do, or what we can do in terms of either making your life and your department or your ministry much better, more effective and more efficient, and how best we can probably serve the public?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. I will say that the support of the entire House and this committee is quite welcome. I am extremely pleased to be working with the caliber of individuals that we have within CBC and the other agencies across the ministry. I can say that, when we make our request, it's usually based on sound business cases. For it to pass my office, they have to justify it to me first before I try to argue it, because if I can't argue for it, then there's very little success of getting it argued otherwise. So we'd ask for your support there as well. I'd also encourage you to continue to encourage Caymanians to look at this particular area. I know as MLAs you interact with young people, and it's one of the things that I'm really proud about is when we argue and successfully defend funding for hiring recruits, and we go through and we get a solid batch of Caymanians coming in, and we're able to develop them over the years and see them grow into excellent officers. That's something that's great as well. So if you can continue your efforts as well to help guide Caymanians into the law enforcement arm of our uniform division of government, that would be extremely helpful.
Going to send them, but they seem to have a lot of difficulty getting accepted. I mean, they turn them down because they can't run a 100-yard dash in 5 seconds. And I don't think that too many policemen can do that now. But they pass all the academic stuff and then they turn them down because they're not fit. You need to do a lot of improvement and encouragement and availability. You need to go into the schools. We just had a whole pile of people graduate from Clifton Hunter with high qualifications, some unbelievable qualification. You need to go and recruit them people specifically. That's what we used to do in the 60s and 70s, right?
That's right.
But they're not doing that. And when they come out and the people go to try to get these positions, the red tape just slows them down. And we always seem to be having Caymanians jump the 13th hurdle. We're giving jobs to foreigners on a subjective interview where the foreigner got 4 points more total than the Caymanian. If you ask him where North Side is when he come in, he don't know.
And just to give you a perfect example, backing up what the chairman just said, you have a young Caymanian goes off to jolly old England, gets a bachelor's degree in criminology, gets a master's degree in counterterrorism, applies to the police force, can't get a job. What does what does this young man do? But yet, just recently, there was a foreign policeman sent off to England for 2-3 weeks on a counterterrorism course. So these are the things that our young people are having to fight through. So when you say send them, I will not send them, sir. I'll bring them to your office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I literally had goosebumps on my arm when at UCC a couple months back we had the uniform branch across the government participate, and we had primary school children coming in, and our officers in their uniform with all their gear were able to talk to them about all the offerings across not just our ministry but other ministries as well, and to see those young people saying, you have scientific people that test drugs and figure out what things are, and there's a role, even if I'm academic, there's a role for me to play in this organization. So we are taking that on board. So I know there's work to be done, but we are starting young and following through. And if we treat people like the way I was treated, coming in as an intern and end up as a chief officer, then we'll have good times ahead. Thank you, sir.
I refer to the years gone by, how we used to do it. It's not happening now, we know. And we need to get back to that. But thank you very much for your time, sir. We appreciate it, and we give you your get out of jail card early this evening, man. Well, thank you very much. Tomorrow, just two little housekeeping matters before we leave. Tomorrow we're doing government's use of outsourced services, and we have Mr. Ken Jefferson in the hot seat again, first thing up, and followed by Mr. Tarak Bashir, and then Ms. Sitonia Cacho, the chief officer. So you confirm that all of these are on time tomorrow. One other item we need to do is we need to confirm the date to the Owen Roberts hearing, because we always seem to be conflicting with the date. The last date did work with the audit office. I know, that's fine. No, you don't have to be sorry about that. If I accommodated all of them other ones, make sure we can accommodate you, because you have a legitimate reason. You're not going on vacation. Your people are working. So we need to select that. Anyone has a date to suggest? We're moving from November the 26th, no? So I don't know, how does December the 3rd? Huh? We going London. Okay, that not gonna work so good. The chairman gonna be in London. But we're gonna go in for a week, right? We're back. How about? The thing we're going to is the 5th, 6th, and 7th, right?
Yeah, we need to go on the 6th.
Yeah.
So that week, but I'm going to go a week early.
Oh, okay.
Because of,
Yeah, because the actual seminar is the 9th and the 10th.
yeah.
How does the 3rd of December sound for? Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, please forgive me. I wanted to sincerely thank the Auditor General and her team for the detailed work that they put forward in this report. The action items and the recommendations are things that we can take on board, and we have taken on board as we go forward. So I just want to go on record as thanking them for the work.
In third TV, she not Trump, I'm flattering and getting away with her. And thank you, because what we have been trying to do, particularly with the PSC over the last couple of years, is exactly that. We want to take it from a confrontational situation to where we're all collectively working to achieve the best for everybody. And that's a good example of how things can be done without getting in all this contention and. So thank you very much for you and your staff. Meeting is adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.